Okay, so we're diving deep today. Bonnie and Clyde, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows Bonnie and Clyde, but you gave me some sources here, and it's clear there's a lot more to their story, way more than that. That romanticized outlaw image we usually see.
Yeah, for sure. It's a fascinating story, and the sources you sent, they go into a lot of detail from their early lives all the way to their dramatic end, their crimes, how they were portrayed in the media. That's something your material really gets into, and the manhunt that ultimately brought them down.
Right, the manhunt. So our mission today, based on what you've given me, is to kind of peel back the layers, look past the Hollywood version, figure out what really made them tick and why their story still fascinates us even all these years later.
Yeah.
By the end of this deep dive, we want folks to have a much clearer, more nuanced view of Bonnie and Clyde based purely on the information you provided. Okay, so let's start with Bonnie. That picture we all have in our heads, cigar in her mouth, gun in hand, the toughest nails gangster woman. Where did that even come from, according to your research?
Well, it's interesting, and your sources really highlight this. That image, the one that really stuck, came from just one roll of film, undeveloped film, that the police found after a shootout in Joplin.
Joplin, okay.
Yeah, it showed Bonnie and Clyde posing with guns, goofing around, and that's what the newspapers went crazy for.
Wow.
But the real Bonnie, before all this, was quite different, as your sources show.
So who was she then, before the legend?
Her full name was Bonnie Elizabeth Parker. She was a waitress from a suburb of Dallas. By all accounts, a good student, enjoyed school plays, wrote poetry, and apparently she had a thing for nice clothes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's this story. When she was 16, she got a tattoo, a heart, with her and her boyfriend's names intertwined.
Oh, wow.
She dropped out of school and married him soon after. But it wasn't exactly a happy ending, was it? I mean, if we look at the details you sent over, her husband wasn't around much. There were rumors of infidelity.
Right. So not a fairy tale, more like a recipe for trouble, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say she was looking for more than what life in a Dallas suburb could offer back then.
Right.
She wasn't a hardened criminal from the start, that's for sure.
Right. Okay, so that's Bonnie. What about Clyde? Completely different background, I'd imagine.
Yeah, Clyde Chestnut Barrow. Born into a poor farming family, they moved to West Dallas, a tough area. But he had dreams, not of robbing banks, but of being a musician. Played the guitar and the saxophone, actually.
Huh. So almost the opposite of what we think of him as a musician. That's interesting.
It is, and it makes you think about how circumstances can shape a person's life. According to your sources, his family struggled after the farm failed, which led them to West Dallas. He started getting into trouble, petty crime at first, stealing turkeys, cars, that kind of thing. A lot of it was about impressing girls, it seems. By the time he met Bonnie, he'd already been arrested several times for car theft.
So two very different people, two very different lives, but both kind of searching for something, it seems.
It's a classic story, isn't it? Two lost souls finding each other. And that's what happened in January of 1930. They met at a friend's house, and there was an instant connection. Bonnie, she was 19 at the time, stuck in a dead-end job, bored out of her mind, as some of your articles point out. And Clyde, well, he was already on the wrong side of the law.
And I guess they just clicked.
It seems so. Bonnie, she was fascinated by gangster movies, that whole life of adventure, excitement. And Clyde, he probably saw in Bonnie someone who accepted him, who saw him for who he really was, flaws and all.
That's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. It makes you wonder how their lives would have turned out if they'd met under different circumstances, right? But unfortunately, their romance was cut short, at least initially, because Clyde got arrested soon after they met.
Of course, right back to jail.
But their connection only grew stronger during that time. They exchanged letters, and then, at Clyde's request, Bonnie smuggled a gun into the prison. She hid it in her clothes during a visit.
Wow, she was already risking a lot for him.
Yeah, she was. And in March of that year, Clyde used that gun to escape with some other inmates.
He must have been thrilled to be free.
Oh, he was. But his freedom was short-lived. He got caught again, and this time he was sent to Eastham Prison Farm, a brutal, notorious place.
I've heard about Eastham. It was notoriously bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And your sources really go into detail about how Clyde's time there changed him. He went in a petty thief, came out a hardened criminal.
What happened in there?
Well, for starters, he committed his first murder. He killed another inmate in self-defense, according to the records you gave me. But then there was this desperate act to avoid hard labor. He had another inmate chop off 2 of his toes with an axe.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's a pretty gruesome detail. He was left with a permanent limp.
I can't imagine the conditions that would drive someone to do that.
It really highlights the brutality of the system back then. He swore revenge on Eastham, wanted to break out and free the other inmates.
He basically became obsessed with Eastham.
Exactly. It consumed him. And then, in a surprising turn of events, his mother managed to secure his parole in January of 32.
Parole, after everything he did.
Well, his mother had connections, and Clyde promised to go straight. He even tried to get a legitimate job, reunited with Bonnie. But the damage was done.
Eastham had changed him too much.
Exactly. He couldn't escape that experience. He put together a small gang, Bonnie included, and they started robbing to fund his plan to break back into Eastham and free the other inmates.
So he was basically planning a prison break.
Yeah, a crazy ambitious plan. And their first attempts at robbery were, well, amateurish, to say the least.
They weren't exactly master criminals at this point, huh?
Not even close. Their first attempt, a jewelry store heist, was a disaster. Half the gang got caught. Bonnie even spent a few months in jail but was released due to lack of evidence. It's interesting, though, even during this time, she was still writing poetry.
Really? Still the romantic at heart.
Yeah, seems so. And then there's Clyde, impulsively shooting and killing a store owner during a robbery for $40 and some cheap jewelry. The owner's wife witnessed the whole thing and identified him to the police.
So not a smooth start to their criminal careers.
No, not at all. A lot of mistakes, a lot of unintended violence, and things only escalated from there, sadly.
So what happened next? Tell me about that.
Well, they just kept robbing mostly small gas stations and grocery stores, nothing big. They became known as the Barrow Gang, constantly on the run, living out of stolen cars.
Right, always on the move.
Yeah, and Clyde had a thing for Ford V8s. He loved those cars, how fast and powerful they were.
He actually wrote a letter to Henry Ford himself.
He did. It's pretty amazing, actually. He basically praised Ford for making such a great car, saying that as long as he had breath in his lungs, he'd sing the praises of the Ford V8. I mean, talk about audacity.
It's almost funny in a dark kind of way.
Yeah.
But then things took a serious turn in Joplin, Missouri, right?
Right, Joplin. Clyde's brother Buck had just gotten out of prison, and they all decided to lay low there for a while. They rented an apartment. Buck and his wife, Blanche, joined them. But they weren't exactly inconspicuous.
Too many guns, too much noise.
Exactly. The neighbors got suspicious, heard gunshots, the police were called, and that led to a huge shootout on April 13th, 1933. Bonnie, Clyde, and Buck managed to escape, but in their hurry, they left behind a camera with a bunch of undeveloped film.
And that camera, those photos, they changed everything.
They did. The police developed the film, and the photos, they showed Bonnie and Clyde posing with guns, looking almost glamorous. Those photos went viral. They were in newspapers all over the country.
That's where the iconic Bonnie image really took hold, didn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And the public, especially during the Depression, they ate it up. They saw Bonnie and Clyde as these romantic rebels fighting against the system.
But the reality was far from glamorous, wasn't it? We see that pretty clearly in Blanche Barrow's memoir, one of your sources.
Oh, absolutely. Blanche, Buck's wife, she was caught in the middle of all this chaos, and her account is really eye-opening. She talks about the constant fear, sleeping in cars, hiding out in the woods. They couldn't stay anywhere for long, always looking over their shoulder.
So a far cry from the romanticized image the public had.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And there were tensions within the gang, too. Bonnie and Blanche didn't get along. Buck wanted a normal life, resented being dragged back into this life of crime.
It must have been incredibly stressful, always on edge,
Yeah.
never knowing what the next day would bring.
Definitely. And the more famous they got, the more the police were on their trail. It was a vicious cycle, The more they were hunted, the more violent they became to survive, which only made the public more fascinated.
Talk about a trap.
Exactly. And things got worse. In July of 33, there was a shootout with police in Platte City, Missouri. Then, just a few days later, another one in Dexter, Iowa.
And Buck was killed during that shootout.
He was shot in the head. Blanche was captured, badly injured. The Barrow Gang was now down to just Bonnie, Clyde, and one other accomplice, W.D. Jones. Any romantic notions they might have had were long gone by this point.
They were just surviving.
Barely. They were exhausted, lonely, and homesick. Bonnie tried to contact her mother, hoping for some kind of support, but that reunion was heartbreaking. Her mother couldn't understand what had happened to her daughter, the choices she'd made.
Oh, that's so sad. And then they lost W.D. Jones too, right? He was captured.
Right. So now it was just Bonnie and Clyde. They kept moving, crossing state lines, using that to their advantage because back then, local law enforcement couldn't easily pursue them across state borders.
Clever, but also kind of desperate.
Very desperate. But Clyde, he hadn't given up on his Eastham obsession.
He still wanted to break back in.
Yeah, and incredibly, in January of '34, he actually did it. He raided the prison farm, freed several inmates.
Including Raymond Hamilton.
Yes, him too. But tragically, a prison guard was killed during the escape. This really sealed their fate. They were now cop killers responsible for a prison break. The Texas authorities put a bounty on their heads, dead or alive.
And they brought in Frank Hamer to lead the hunt.
Yeah, Frank Hamer, a legendary Texas Ranger, ruthless, efficient, and a master tracker. He was the perfect or maybe terrifying choice for the job.
He was determined to catch them no matter what.
Absolutely. He spent weeks studying their movements, figuring out their patterns. He realized that Clyde, while good at evading immediate capture, wasn't thinking strategically. He was predictable.
And that's how he got them, by predicting their moves.
Exactly. He set a trap, and on May 23, 1934, it snapped shut. It was a rural highway in Louisiana. Bonnie and Clyde were driving their Ford V8, completely unaware of what was about to happen.
They didn't stand a chance.
No, they didn't. Hamer and his posse were hidden, waiting for them, and when their car got close, they opened fire. It was a complete ambush.
Over 150 bullet holes in the car.
He wasn't overkill, honestly. They were likely dead instantly, but the officers kept firing, out of fear, I guess. It took them 20 minutes to even approach the car. They were that scared of Bonnie and Clyde, even in death.
Crazy, huh?
It is. And the aftermath was almost as bad. Souvenir hunters descended on the scene, taking anything they could get their hands on. Locks of hair, clothing. It was a gruesome spectacle.
So in the end, the legend they created, that image of romantic outlaw lovers, it led to their downfall.
It's ironic, isn't it? The myth they helped create, the media frenzy, it all contributed to their violent demise.
It really makes you think about the power of stories, of how we perceive events, and how that perception can sometimes be so far from reality.
Definitely. This story, it challenges us to look beyond the surface, to see the human beings behind the headlines, the complex factors that shape their lives, and also to question the role of the media, how they can create and destroy legends.
It's a story with a lot of layers, that's for sure. Well, thanks for walking us through it all. It's been enlightening, to say the least.
My pleasure.
And for all of you listening, we hope you found this deep dive into the real Bonnie and Clyde insightful. Their story, it's a reminder that sometimes the truth is far more complex and often more tragic than the legends we tell. Something to think about. Thanks for listening.